What's up everyone, Michael here with an impressions review of Duet, a nice little arcade action game as the developer called it, but I'd also throw it into the rhythm genre as well. It's very methodical and rhythm based in the way that you kind of play it, so it's actually quite interesting. It is a game where you move two little orbs, like rotating as you see in the middle, to dodge obstacles, and they vary up the obstacles and the speeds and things like that quite a bit to make it really, really interesting. And it's actually quite surprising the amount of depth two buttons can actually have in a game like this. It's quite surprising. Anyways, one thing I do want to mention before we continue is that this game was a pain in the rear to capture. Like, I had tons of trouble capturing it, so I'm using a few workarounds. So if there's any visual glitches, audio glitches, stuttering, and things like that, then you're gonna have to just kind of excuse me on it. I tried really hard. Also, ignore the black bar at the top and the bottom. You wouldn't have noticed if I didn't mention it, so yeah, I have to run it in windowed mode, and we'll see that when we get into the settings. That does have to do with some performance issues I want to talk about later in the video, but we'll talk about everything first. Simple art style, we're going to check out the settings first. So there's actually quite a good amount. So there's controls, you can rebind everything, which is quite nice, and it also has gamepad support, unless you're using an Xbox One controller. One problem with the game right now, the developer says he's trying to fix, is that when you have an Xbox One controller plugged in, the game won't even launch, or it'll just crash. Mine would launch and then crash, which was quite annoying. Took a little bit to figure it out. Like, oh yeah, I wasn't even using controller for this game, but it would be nice regardless, and that's kind of annoying, but that is the thing right now. So if you have an Xbox One controller, you're going to be stuck with the keyboard. The game works fine with the keyboard, so you're good. And then you also have languages, which only changes the text in the game. There is voice, but it doesn't change the voice, unfortunately. Just a fact, but it is, you know, it's able to convey the emotion, so I guess it's good enough. At least there is some translation options, and quite a decent amount as well. Then you have graphics options. As I was talking with the recording stuff, my resolution's weird. You get windowed mode, no border, and full screen. Now, one thing about the windowed no border is it actually is a window without a border, not just windowed full screen. And if you do set it to your maximum resolution, it technically goes full screen, but it functions exactly like dedicated full screen for some reason. I don't know what that is, if it's specific to my system, but that's kind of annoying, and that's why I actually have to run in window mode to get the game to run. And then also I have anti-aliasing off because, and then VSync because I'm in windowed mode, but you can change that as well. I would recommend turning on VSync because if the game starts stuttering in different places, and it will, I guarantee you it will, unfortunately, cover that later in the video, then it will start really starting to tear, and I'd rather deal with stutter rather than tear on this game because it requires accuracy. And then you can also apply. You have video settings, which allow you to turn off the visual effects in the background if it starts making you sick. That is really nice to have, especially if you try playing in longer periods. I personally don't have an issue with it, but I know others will. Then you can also invert the colors. Oh God, my eyes. Ow. Okay, don't do that. Then you have paint, which I'll show that in game. It's when you crash into an object, it makes a little paint splatter. And then you have colored backgrounds, which allows the background to be colored or not. And then you have the audio, which I would like to see sliders, but you can turn them on and off, so I guess that's good enough. I would like to see it. And then you have support, which should be named other options, which has where you can buy the awesome, amazing soundtrack, by the way, the credits, the Twitter account, the achievements, and leaderboards. Yes, this game has leaderboards, and it does have some score attack elements we will talk about. Anyways, let's actually go into gameplay now. That was a longer settings screen than I expected. Let's go ahead, and there are different modes, but we're going to go ahead and jump into the story, and I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. Let's do depression. Depression's probably one that works for YouTube content. So, as I said, you are two orbs and you move them left and right. I am using the arrow keys, and that is all I need. And there is a person who talks, and that is the story stuff. I'll talk about that in a little bit later. Anyway, so you have these objects and they are moving towards you and you dodge them. That is the mechanic. Now, the way that they make this interesting is they actually introduce a lot of different kind of shapes and different, you know, speeds and things like that, and it speeds up as you progress. Now, one thing that the game does really extremely well is it actually teaches you mechanics really, really smoothly, as in it starts off really, really slow, and the levels are actually fairly short as well. As you've seen, I just completed 2 levels, so it's not very long, but it starts off pretty slow. So I'll go ahead and show that off by going to one of the early levels. Let's go ahead and do Denial. Yeah, let's go ahead and do Denial 2. There we go. We're in Denial.
And control yourself.
There's the voice. And so a lady says a voice, or has the voice at the beginning of every level. Now, you see it actually starts off pretty slow, and you're like, all right, cool, I can get the hang of this. And the levels are short enough that normally I would complain in a game when it takes a long time to kind of speed up, as in this is the second set of stages, and it's not technically very quick. And it doesn't start getting quick until about Acceptance, which is about the end of the first story. And then it also starts introducing different blocks, and I'm going to start jumping around while I talk about other stuff.
I wish you could see this.
Now, one thing that I want to mention is the story, as we see this lady talking here. Now, the story is actually kind of interesting, as in it's kind of explores emotion and feeling,
If it weren't for me.
which is weird. And I'm going to avoid completing this level because basically I don't want to make any spoilers, but it's kind of a weird exploration of emotion and speech and mystery, which is very strange. I don't really know how to describe it. It's nothing like mind-blowing or anything like that, but it is a thing nonetheless. Now, to kind of go back, actually, let's just go ahead and show the other modes. So there's the story mode. So there's story, which is going to be your core mode. And this is going to be basically your learning stages. And you learn all the mechanics and you're like, all right, cool. I got this moving thing down and I can go fast now. And then you're like, right, I finally beat it. What am I to do next? You can do challenges, which has a bunch of different modes. It has extra levels down at the bottom, which I don't recommend playing unless you're actually good with frustration. Otherwise, you will probably break your keyboard. And you have endless modes and daily challenges, which is actually quite interesting. Now I'll talk about endless in a little bit. And then if you want more story, you also have the epilogue, which actually continues the story sort of, and then an encore, which also extends the story even farther, and the levels get more and more difficult and introduce new mechanics, like I can show you where I'm at now. Now, I did say the game ends up speeding up as well, but when you go into these new modes and you learn new mechanics, it actually slows down. And so when it first introduces this stage, it actually starts relatively slow, so that you can get the hang of the level. Now, when you fail, when you run into a block, which you inevitably will at some point, the level just restarts and you get a nice little paint splatter on where you crashed, so you actually know where you screwed up. And that can actually be really, really useful when you're trying to play. However, you can turn it off if you start having some performance issues. And now I want to go back to the endless mode and explain one last gameplay mechanic. There's also speedruns. If you complete the story modes, you can actually go through and try to beat it at the best time possible. I didn't end up completing it because they were very difficult. Anyway, so there was the daily missions. This is just going to send you 3 waves, and you got to complete all 3 waves. If you die, it starts you off on the wave that you died at. And then if you go to challenges and you go to endless mode, I'll go ahead and go to endless mode on encore because I didn't show the encore mode. So this is encore mode. They can come from both directions, and this is freaking absurd. But one thing that's interesting about the endless mode is that you get lives. So instead of just being like, oh, you screwed up and you're done for, instead what happens in the top left, you can actually see my score and you can see these hearts filling up. Now what happens is over time, the hearts fill up, but when you crash, you lose a heart. This allows you to actually have multiple tries on one level. And if you can actually get pretty far, you actually get a lot of tries. I mean, on each level, or each wave, I should say, you only get 3 tries, like at the most, because it doesn't regen enough. Like when you complete a level, that's a heart. So if you can actually get pretty good at it and you can complete a few waves, you can actually, you know, give yourself extra lives, which is wow, that was lame. Which is actually interesting for an endless mode. A lot of games don't introduce that in their endless modes. And then these are completely randomized, just like the daily missions as well and nightly missions. They, or levels, I should say. They are random, it seems. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're designed. I don't really know. They probably design sections and then it sends random sections at you. But they are very, very challenging and they are well designed fairly well as well. And there is actually one more thing I want to talk about that I didn't talk about before. Now you may notice I have a little green marker on some of these. Now if I go to one that I don't, you'll see in the top left I have this little green kind of triangle thing. Now that is actually the number of directions I can move. So if you actually play through perfectly and only use the right number of moves, you can actually get a perfection run. And that is actually where a lot of the replayability is going to come into. Not only the endless modes and the score attack type stuff with that in the daily missions that are changed every day, which I believe it's random. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's random. And basically, you can go through every level and get a perfection score, which is actually pretty cool and actually really, really challenging. And I actually learned a lot of little small tricks and mechanics that way as well. Just trying to be like, oh, what can I do? Like right there, I was like, I didn't have to stop for those. And so I've actually been able to reduce the number of turns I took, although I still screwed it up. It's actually quite difficult. Now let's talk about graphics and sound real quick. So graphic style, pretty nice. I'm going to go ahead and just do some endless. Actually, no, let's go ahead and do some quickening challenges. These ones are fast. I like these ones. Woo! Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, I wasn't expecting that fast. Anyways, so let's talk about graphics. So the graphics are simple. I like the moving backgrounds and stuff like that. I wish there was a little bit more variance, as in I've seen all of them within the first like 10 minutes of playing the game, which is kind of unfortunate. And they can get distracting. Good thing you can turn them off, because it could get really, really annoying for some people. And I wish I could make it so that they were always colored, because I prefer it like in the background, how it's red right now, or when it goes blue. I prefer it when it's colored instead of the gray color, which seems to pop out a lot more. I wish they would have darkened up the gray a little bit more, and then that probably would have been better, or maybe added an option for that. That would have been nice, but regardless, it's a nice effect and you can disable it if you want. The paint effects also look really, really nice, and it allows you to kind of know where you're, improving. It's like, oh, I see that paint splatter last time, and I got past it because I'm awesome. And the sound design is actually quite good as well. And not only the sound design, because, when you hit things and you move and stuff like that, it sounds good. Like, when you hit something, and the sound effect just kind of fits the aesthetic. And the music does as well, surprisingly. The music is really strange. And not strange in a bad way, strange in a good way, and it kind of fits the game, which is surprising because you wouldn't expect a game like this to have a perfect soundtrack. And the soundtrack for this game, in my opinion, is absolutely amazing. I love it. Like, every single song inside of this soundtrack, I have enjoyed. Every single one. And I've actually considered going and getting the soundtrack for just normal listening. Like, it is fantastic. And like I said, it fits the game. And the voice as well also fits the game very, very well. It's got this very interesting look. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. I'm sure there's a perfect word for it, and I just don't know it. So yeah, and that is pretty great. But there is a caveat, because the game actually has a really, really bad stuttering problem. Now, from what you've seen here, my game actually hasn't stuttered at all, unless my footage is screwed up, and then I apologize for that. But for the most part, it actually doesn't stutter at all for, when you're playing in general. But when I first start the game, within the first 5 minutes, the game has a huge performance issue, as in it begins to lag. It begins to stutter within a minute of starting the game. And then progressively for about 5 minutes, the game gets slower and slower and stuttier, and then the game just sooner or later just flushes its memory, and then it starts off and it runs perfectly fine. Not everyone's experiencing this issue, so maybe it's something to do with Windows 10, maybe it's something to do with the controller drivers that I have in, maybe it's something to do with my keyboard. I really don't know what it is, and I haven't been able to figure it out, and it actually caused me a lot of problems when trying to record as well, as in when I tried to start my recording software in any other mode than what I had. Whoa, I've never seen these before. Cool, new mechanic. Whenever I tried to record, the stuttering would actually accelerate and then it wouldn't fix itself. And so I actually had to kind of fix it by going into windowed mode, letting it play for about 15 minutes before I recorded. And then I came back and it's like, oh, cool. It already flushed its memory and it's perfectly fine. So it does seem like it is some sort of a memory issue, and I hope it can get fixed. The chances of it, maybe not, but it is something to keep in mind. But if you do start having stuttering issues, one thing that I immediately thought is like, oh, I'll just restart the game. And then I was like, oh yeah, and then I'll just, oops, dang it. And then I would just be like, yeah, I just have to restart the game every 5 minutes. That's kind of annoying. But it actually came down to the point of I'll just leave it on and sooner or later it'll fix itself, and that's kind of nice. So do keep that in mind. If it doesn't fix itself after a few minutes, then I guess restart your game. And that actually ruined a lot of enjoyment from the game for me personally. So, that is a thing to keep in mind. But so far, that's really been the only negative to this game so far. As in, the only other complaint I'd have is when I go into a level and I hit escape and go to exit, it goes all the way back to the main menu. That's kind of annoying. And I would like to have volume sliders as well, as in I would like to make the lady's voice a little bit louder, just so that it doesn't get drowned out by the music. Although maybe I would want to turn off the lady's voice and turn up the music, because the music is actually pretty awesome. And we'll go ahead and do a speed run. I don't know. This one allows you to show your speed and your percentage, which is kind of interesting. And this one actually goes faster than the default story mode, so that is a thing. So what do I think of this game? Well, I'm in two shoes about it, because on one end, I absolutely loved the game, but the performance issue and the trouble recording it actually kind of made me pretty salty about this game, and I actually had to wait a day to record it, because I was like, yeah, I don't want to record it today, because I'm just going to, get way too into the whole performance issue thing, because it was extremely frustrating to get past that problem. Now that I solved the problem, and, well, found a workaround rather, it's perfectly fine, and I love playing the game. Like, the game is perfect for what it is. And it's fairly cheap as well. It's like $5 or something like that, and goes even less on sale every once in a while. So, I would strongly recommend picking it up, and hopefully you don't get the performance problems. Like, that's really it. As in, the performance issues suck, and it does ruin the experience for a certain amount of time. But once you get by that point, it's actually a really, really solid game, and the soundtrack is amazing as well. And I'll probably end up picking that up at some point too. So props to the musical artist. It said it at the beginning and I already forgot his name. I apologize. But yeah, a solid recommendation from me. Just, I really hope that it solves the performance issues at some point. And if it doesn't work, just, you know, power through it and sooner or later it flushes its memory and it's fixed. So, you know, but it is a fun game. Like if you want to just try out for a level, it is a little bit frustrating at times because you'll go to one level and you keep screwing up at the same spot, you know, that whole situation. But, you know, it controls smoothly. It runs nice when it's not having that performance issue that I keep repeating. Anyways, that has been a solid recommendation from me. This has been Michael with Duet, a nice little arcade action game to where you roll around orbs in a rhythm type fashion. And it is quite good. It also won some awards, apparently. It said it on the Steam page. I don't pay attention to awards, though, because people just kind of, you know, give out awards sometimes, and they don't really mean anything. But this one definitely deserved some awards. Like, it's really good. Anyways, make sure to leave some comments on the game while you like and subscribe for more videos like this one. And I will see you guys in those next videos. And obviously, if you like the game, make sure to pick it up. And I do recommend listening to some of the songs in the soundtrack. I think it's awesome. Like, I might actually like the soundtrack more than the game, even though I really love the game. Like, easily one of my favorite games that I've played in quite a while. It's really good.